Well, I knew I was going to see Darren Barnett in the man cave, but perhaps I should read my notes from wonderful Lucy, the wonderful life-saving executive producer of this program, and I would have noticed that Christy McSweeney is here as well. Hello, one and all.
Oh,
look at this.
so
Surprise
amazing.
faces.
It's a high school reunion.
It's so great, isn't it? And isn't it high school, Darren?
Yes, it is.
It is indeed. We'll talk about that.
Darren had the whole play school face. You were just great. You didn't know not to say anything.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love it. Okay. So, whatever happens with the Liberal leadership, Jacinta Nampijinpa Price will be the deputy. We haven't heard of anyone suggesting that there's going to be a contest there. So it's kind of all or nothing in terms of leadership for Susan Lee, moving from deputy up, or Angus Taylor from treasurer up. Christy, if you want to say which way, if you would vote, fine. But let's talk about the Jacinta of it all. Incredibly popular with people who voted for the coalition last Saturday.
Yeah.
And clearly somebody who is effective and can reach beyond that number, as we saw when it came to The Voice. Mm-hmm. So I've got to say, I like that either way, when it comes to a leader, that you're going to have a person who can sit in the man cave or go on Q&A and be just as persuasive.
Look, I think she's fantastic. And I will say, uncommon to senators, she actually has faced an election of the public in local government in the Alice, where she's from. So, and she's also prosecuted the No case, which was a mini campaign, sure. So there's a lot of senators putting their 2 cents in who have never actually door-knocked and faced the public and ran for general election, and she has. So I'll make that point. Look, I will also make the point, to be devil's advocate here, being in Parliament 3 years, not in the Liberal Party, and taking on the role of deputy leader is a really difficult cultural bridge to cross. Sure. Deputy leadership is about the factional issues, the dealings, who's upset with who's jostling for promotion, issues within the wider coalition diaspora, and the deputy leader, whomever it may be, is going to have to take a significant role in working with the federal director in that root and branch restructure of the party. And someone with no cultural history of the Liberal Party, I think that's a really, big bow to draw. That's all I'll put there. That's a risk, not taking away from what a wonderful politician she is.
And this is the thing, right? If you watch your show for long enough, you know on nights like this, we'll be having conversations like this. It's not about advocacy for one thing or the other. It's about understanding all of those things so that if one thing happens, you can start to put 2 and 2 together, right? Interestingly, I thought when Jacinta Nampijinpa Price was on with The Outsiders this morning, I liked what she said about the campaign thus gone. Let me explain why after you hear from her.
We ran an election driven by fear. And that should never have been the case, because the Australian people could see that. Some of us had some wonderful policies, but we were stifled from being able to give that message, tell Australians what it was we were providing, what we had on offer, and do it with conviction. That was a lost opportunity.
Now, Darren, when I was talking with Nigel Farage last week, and they just had that phenomenal result in a completely different voting system, but in the local council elections, right, where think about Reform, which didn't exist a couple of years ago, has more seats, higher percentage of the vote than any other existing political party, right? He talked about the power of being a happy warrior. And I think it's such a thing that so many politicians need to be reminded. Now, I get it. You're running for the most serious of jobs. It's not just about, giggling and taking the piss all the time, but being a happy warrior is really important when you're trying to convince people, not just that you can be the leader, but that you're going to be a decent person along the way, right?
Look, there's a couple of things. Jacinta Price in her interview, I think part of the problem, the fear was provided by someone else. It was provided by Trump. And look at Farage. Farage, even when Zelensky and Trump were in the White House, everyone in the British Parliament backed the Ukraine, and that included Farage. I remember seeing it at the time. That the fear in the Australian election was provided a little bit by Ukraine, but a lot by the day our share market tanked. That
100%.
fear was inserted whether the Liberal Party liked it or not, and it flipped the switch to almost a kind of, do you want to change horses midstream, to go back to the old wag the dog analogy. That Labor became the safe pair of hands. Do you want to take a risk? So I don't think the Liberals ran a bad campaign in the sense that, like, you know, the campaign they wanted to run, they couldn't run.
Correct.
And that wasn't their fault. They couldn't run it.
It was a bit their fault.
No, hang on. I'm going to change that a little bit.
Sure, but-
You've got to be adaptable. But
Yes.
the campaign that they had
Yeah.
designed, in the end, they couldn't run it.
Correct. Well, as we
And
showed,
fear was a factor, whether you like it or not.
I mean, as I showed everyone last week, right? One of the things, and again, I'm not going to go too deep into it. I know how it bores some, but for the point of understanding, okay, was that in February, mortgage holders 51.49 to Labor. Then the first of the interest rate cuts, 50-50'd it. Then the stock market stuff in relation to tariffs and also the Zelensky stuff started to push at 51.49, and then obviously it ends up at 55.45, which of course was the wider.
And tax cuts too, which
Well,
inexplicably a Liberal Party didn't back tax cuts. I know what they did, and they went to 15 petrol stations, but it gave people the idea that momentum was shifting. Life has been difficult, but it might be going to get a little bit better.
And the rate cut came in.
And the rate, the rate cut. Paul mentioned the rate cut.
also
The rate cut and the tax cut. They both just gave people a bit of hope, and that's where you get back to that happy warrior stuff. That Albanese, to his great credit, ran an incredibly positive, upbeat campaign, and he looked like he was on top of his brief. And 3 years ago, he was a bit shakier, but he looked in charge and in control, and that worked for him.